I'm Lutheran.
I don't get to church for another 5 minutes. Everybody's gonna listen to Dalton, so this will be easy. Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I had to listen to Daryl earlier, and I don't know why Daryl had a microphone. That just was like, what are you doing, dude? Anyway, my name's Justin Maddock. I am one of the 2 guys from Maddock you're going to hear today with that similar last name. I know quite a few of you. I know I had in here, I was going to talk about drought resistance, and I am going to talk about it a little bit, but I'm going to more or less tell you the story of what we're doing and kind of where we're going and why we're doing a lot of things, because at the end of it all, if you are following through and improving your soil, making your things better, you're going to have some drought tolerance built in. So here you go. We're going to start out. They were teasing me about slides of my kids. These are my 6 children. Yes, I'm pretty certain they're all mine. They all kind of look like me in a lot of ways. My wife doesn't find that funny when I tease her about that. But, we're from 14 years old to 2 years old, and for the most part, this is my labor force in more ways than they probably like. I'm also lucky in the aspect that I live between my father and my little brother, who's going to speak next. So unfortunately for them, they get to help me quite a bit too, as far as the work that we do. We are also kind of in cohorts with our oldest brother, who is a meat scientist by schooling, but he's a what would you call him? Full of shitter by trade. He's a consultant for food safety, and he's kind of one of the only guys in North Dakota. So he makes a good living doing that. But he also owns some cows, and he's working with us to try to develop a meat business and things like that. But along with him, we also have another brother named Rob, a couple sisters. I got the little one, Callie, is actually married to a rancher up by town. So we've got ranching and farming all throughout. But the reason I put this up is some of the things when you talk about holistic management, again, most of you know this, you talk about the people, the finances, and the resource. So this is more where my priority starts up. This is why I do a lot of what I do. So here's my people again. See, Keith, there's going to be lots of slides of my kids. Superman down in front kind of runs the show right now. So again, people, resources, and finances, these are the things that we concentrate on when we're trying to make decisions on the things that we're doing. Our resource probably being the most important, because the resource kind of gets to determine our finances, which kind of determines the happiness and how the people are moving forward. So the things we worry about, carbon cycle, water cycle, nutrient cycle, as far as the resource is concerned, and that brings it all back around as far as where the drought tolerance and things like that get worked in. Again, the resources, the soil. So the story of our ranch is, so back in the early 1990s, my father took a holistic management course, actually from Wayne Barry. I don't know if Wayne's in here, but he's around somewhere. So that took him down the road of kind of holistic management to a point. He implemented a lot of cell grazing and grass management that wasn't necessarily there before, things that he never learned. Our grandfather, when he ranched, it was, 300-400 cows on 500-600 acre pastures, no rotation, very monocultured, very hands off. Let's just say it that way. And that's what he grew up learning. Well, I don't know if you guys heard about a lake we have up around us, Devil's Lake. Back in the early 90s, swallowed up about 2,500 acres of pasture land that we had. I honestly can't believe that my father has sons that are able to ranch, but he was able to, even though they lost all that land, he was able to pick up all their land, and by implementing some of these grazing techniques and things that he's taught us and grown, we are able to be ranchers still. Most people can't believe you can lose that much grass and actually survive, but both him and his brother have survived and are both still in the livestock business. But the enterprises that we deal with generally, and I'll talk about more about my ranch now as I get into things. Cow calf is my biggest enterprise that we have. I'll we'll talk about, get into a little more later. Heifer development, we got grass calves, and then things we're talking about, and we were visiting over dinner with some folks. My little brother's a little more adventurous than I am, but he got into sheep this last year. I just can't bring myself to doing that yet. But so these are things that we talk about trying to implement, because multi-species, and it helps your ground much more than just simply running cattle or one of these single enterprises on there. So, we're starting to get into meat sales, things like that. I know there's quite a few in this room that are doing the same things. I think that's a good place for us to go as a group, a like-minded group. I think that's going to be something that is going to become more and more important. There's a lot of people in the world who are starting to look more and more at their health, and why aren't we as healthy as we should be. I think a lot of this comes back to our resource, the soil, and making sure that everything is healthy. I went through some of these slides. A lot of these I'm probably going to wind up jumping over, but I got in there. One of the other things I do that my father and brother don't do, I'm a farmer as well, unfortunately. I looked at an opportunity to pick up some land, actually, that that our grandfather had some farmland, and my uncle had been renting out to conventional farmers in the area, and there are lots and lots of saline patches. There was white all over that farm, and you talk to my uncle, he said, I don't understand why that happened. Well, I can tell you why that happened. This thing has been continually tilled for the last 100 years. They're running chemicals through it. They're killing every biological thing that could possibly be in that soil, and it's wrecking what nature had actually meant for it to happen there. Well, funny thing. So, being a that's the word I'm looking for, low input producer as far as ranching is concerned, I'm trying to carry that over to farming, and I've read some books that Gabe Brown had put me on. I'm actually looking forward to reading his new book, but he talks about no-till. And I'll tell you what, so I've been farming that land for 3 years, and the saline patches are already starting to go away. I'm growing kochia, but I'm growing something. So, again, some of the other stuff on there, we're talking about multi-species, just it's basic health of the land. What we have in our soil, what that soil should be, man has tried to pull back and make it how he wants it, and that's not what nature had intended. So we're trying to get back to more of what nature had planned. Another example, we were visiting, I don't remember who I was talking to last night, it was Jet or just who it was, but one of the places, and I'll show you the grazing system that we have. Back in the 90s, Dad quit farming, and I mean, this is stuff that only an old ornery Norwegian would farm. Stuff that goes like this and down the other side, and all the topsoil is gone. You know, these hills are eroded down to nothing. It's clay pan on top, all sorts of soil on the bottom. So, but back in the 90s, Dad said, I can't do this no more. He planted everything back into it was a 5 or a 6 species mix. So that's really what is growing there. Well, with a equip contract that I entered into a couple of years ago, 3 years back, you know, they had to do an inventory. So that was back in the early 90s. What are we looking at? 25 years approximately. So in that 25 years, they did an inventory on that same land here not too long ago, and there was over 115 different species of plants and forbs out on that ground. So we didn't plant it. Where'd it come from? Well, it was there. We just had to allow nature to manifest and grow what it wanted to have there. And it's amazing now what we see when we go out and we graze in cattle and the plants and the forbs that are there. It's, if you take a identification guide with you, my kids like looking stuff up now. What's that one? Usually I can't tell them, but they like to look through things. Anyway. One of the main things when I think about my cattle and what we're doing is something we didn't used to do. So Dad took that holistic management. One of the things we didn't have really, etched out, we didn't have a grazing plan. So not that I'm concrete with things, not that I write everything out, but every spring before I get out there, I have written out a basic idea of where I'm going to start and where I'm going to go from there. A lot of these other guys talk about grazing plans and how they're going to know where they're going to be at a certain time of year, and maybe not that finite, but it's you want to have a good idea where you're going to be moving those cattle, and not just for your own sanity, but also so that you can look at the history of where you have grazed and what you have done, and make sure that you're managing that land in the way that it'll help you to produce as much as possible. So, rest being a big part of what we're trying to do with what I'm doing. I'm getting back to the grazing part for me. I'm a once over grazer. At least I have been now for the last 3 or 4 years. So I definitely have to do a lot of planning as far as trying to make sure I'm not on that ground too early. We want that ground to usually at least have 340, 360 days of rest. We're in a drought now in my area, so I've got to be even more careful about not pounding on that ground and letting it fully come back and get the forage and stuff that I need there in order for those animals to be able to graze and not take it all, but I take quite a bit. We've had tours up there. We had Jim Garrish up a couple of years ago, and he looked at things and he kind of hemmed and hawed and looked at me funny, but I take some of them pastures down 60 to 70%, but at the same time, they get a year's worth of rest. When we get average rainfall, that's fine. When we're dry like this, it's probably not going to be as fine. I'm finding out now I'm going to have to probably start a little later next year, or find another different place to start out. So there's learning curves, there's things I'm doing wrong, and I'm still learning, even though I'm trying to emulate what my dad was doing, and you know, to make sure that I'm not completely screwing things up. Oh, so, well, I mean, you guys can read a lot of this as I'm going through. Please ask me questions as we're going. Let's see, so this is the part where I wanted to get to. So I'm running right now between, this year it's 350, 380 cows total. We try to run one big group. This year I had to split down a few open cows and take them to a different spot. But for the most part, this is what we've been doing the last few years. We're running 350 to 400 pair together. And when you get up to our part of the world, it isn't as easy as if you were out west. And maybe out west it's complicated too, but I travel from anywhere from 16 miles north of my place to 20 miles south of my place. That's my I wish I had everything in between, but I've got 400 or 500 acres here, I've got 300 or 400 acres here, I've got 700 or 800 acres there. So that's one of the things that we have a problem with. In the past, we tried to run separate herds, but we wanted to try to make sure we're getting as much animal impact on that land as possible. So I don't know, it's been 3 or 4, maybe 5 years now. We started running a single herd. At the point when I run out of grass on one of my grazing systems, we bring in the semis, we load everything up, and we take them to the next grazing system. And it takes a day. It's a big undertaking. It's a big headache for me, but we feel that it's probably something that is going to improve our ground much more than it is going to be a hindrance to me. I can survive a day if it means that I'm going to be improving the ground. Let's see. So yeah, we've got the 2 grazing systems mainly for the cow herd. We total about 1,500 acres. So you do the simple math in your head. We're running cows for anywhere from about 3 to 4 acres per cow. I think I might have more of that in the slide later on. I'm kind of all over with my slides, and I apologize for that. You do the math on that. Up in our area, guys who are a continuous graze situation tend to be 7 to 10 acres for the summer. So I mean, we're cutting our needs in half for our cow herd, or basically being able to double our cow herd on the land that we're on. As far as the second part, the next series and what we're doing as far as the livestock is concerned, we hold on to our calves. I've tried doing what some of these other guys have done and leave the calf on as long as you can, and these other guys are having great luck, and I probably should start buying heifers from them. I just haven't gotten around to doing that yet. But we tried running calves with our cows, and we got into January a couple of years ago, and we had a massive amount of them come over. And the banker wasn't real excited for me to do that again. So we actually wean our calves. I'll wean my calves sometime in the next 2 to 3 weeks here. and I know they're pretty young. We're late May, early June. That's when we start calving. So we're looking at 5 months old. But we'll wean the calves. We'll get them on a rough diet of grass, alfalfa, things like that. Rough them through the winter, and then come next spring we kick them out on grass again, and hopefully reap the benefits of all that green growth. So just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. So like I talked about for my cows being a once over, my father is actually managing the backgrounding and the grass calves. And how do I put this nicely? My dad likes to change the way he does things fairly often. So I don't know, about every year or two, we change our ideas or how he wants to approach things. So he got me going on this once over on the cows, and I like that. That for me, all my cows are in one place. I can manage them. I can, like, guy calls me and says your cows are out in my wheat, I know where I gotta go. So now with him on this grass-fed grass calves, and I understand his logic behind it, we're trying to keep the grass in a more green situation, you know, a higher energy situation. So he's actually taken that grazing system where they're at back to a multiple times over. So last year and then this year again, I think he made it 3 or 4 times through the system. Even with us, like me and my brother have talked, this is our first drought up there. I don't remember a drought. I was 10 years old the last time we were this dry. So it's been pretty nice, but at the same time, it's pretty stressful now for us trying to figure out how we're to manage things and make things work. But my father says it will rain again. But he's been able to manage this and keep our calves out on the grass just by managing what's there and rotating the cattle through a little differently. So he's been doing a good job with that. What else did I put on here? The grass finishing, that's something we're just really getting into, starting with my little brother and my oldest brother. It's a business we're trying to move more and more of that product. There's cities like Fargo and Grand Forks, those people are looking for that kind of stuff. So that's an opportunity for not just us, but all of the people that are like-minded in this to really move some of the animals and the health that we're growing. I did talk about my farming components. See, I get ahead of myself. What did I put on there? The evil farming? No, that's not this slide. So the last couple of years I've been planting wheat and soybeans, monoculture, horrible. After the soybeans went to $7 this year and I raised 15 bushel soybeans, I'm fairly certain there's fence going around all of it and we're gonna run more cattle next year. Just, you start punching numbers and putting the pencil to a lot of this, you can make more money running cattle on a lot of this land than you can ever farm it. No farmers won't agree with that, but push a pencil to it once. Here we go. Oh, I'm getting into the grazing system. So this is the first system where we have this is where we go usually by the end of April. We're in here until mid-July, end of July. What do we have here? 16 paddocks, I think 16 or 17 paddocks, yeah. And I've been breaking them down even further. Some of these paddocks are upwards of 50 to 60 acres. I've been cutting them in half again, trying to get the animals to impact the ground that needs it the most. Even though Dad's been doing this for 25 years, there are still spots, and we've had this stuff that whole time. There are still spots where we don't get a lot of growth. The ground still has not healed enough from all the farming that took place there that it can't grow anything. So actually, and this is another evil thing I've been doing, but the last couple of years, like on 17 here, it looks white because it's white, it's clay. It's a horrible piece. It's one of them ones where it's all hill and just, it's not a good piece of ground right now. It has been very unproductive. And when you're renting ground, which is, I rent most of what we have, you need every acre to produce for you. So on this ground, I actually caved in and bought a BALE processor. More for the reasoning with this in mind, to be honest with you. We call this the hills. This is our hills because it's just all these pastures are hilly and tough. But like 17, 1, 2, 15, and 16, they were farmed, and they were farmed hard. So there's lots of clay pan, there's lots of unproductive ground. So what I'm doing with the bale processor is I'm spreading out as much hay and garbage and trying to get it spread out. I know I could accomplish this with bale grazing as well, but I want to make a greater impact in the circle. And I feel like I can do that with a processor at this point in time. So there's always things to improve, always things to be looking at. I'm hoping I'm doing that by adding carbon and covering that ground up, where I'm already seeing an improvement on 17. That's the one I've been pounding on the last 2 springs. I've been spreading out pea oat hay that I buy from the neighbor, and I've got oats growing there half the time. So it's, you know, it's coming around. Hopefully we can keep this moving forward, and the carbon cycle will get fired up again on those pieces. Oh, this is an old slide I had, I just threw in here. So again, going back to the drought stuff. So when we're talking about cattle, we need to really look at the size of our cattle. 1,400 pound cows. So science proves this, and I come from a long line of scientists. A cow will eat 0.2897% of her body weight a day. So 3% is the easy math on that. So when you start figuring that out against 1,400 pound cow compared to a 1,000 pound cow, especially when it comes to your winter costs, I mean, it's pretty simple to look at that and realize that the smaller cow is going to eat less feed. Well, if that cow eats less feed, I can own more smaller cows, still have the same amount of feed and have more cows, right? So one of the things I have down here, Kit Farrow is a rancher down in Colorado. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of him. One of my favorite things is he's got a picture with 2 trailers. One's got 400 pound cows in it, 50,000 pounds worth of 400 pound calves, and 50,000 pounds worth of 600 pound calves. And you ask people which one's worth more. 95% of the time, people will say the trailer with 600 pound calves in it. Well, no. The 50,000 pound trailer, 400 pound calves, those 400 pound calves are worth $1.80, and the 600 pound calves are worth $1.60. It's the same weight, so your 400 pound trailer is worth more. But that doesn't work. Nobody does, because you can run more smaller cows. That's what it comes back to with a lot of this. So it's all about efficiencies and getting the most out of what we can. And those bigger cows, yes, some of them can be efficient and some of them can do well for you, but on the average, they are not going to produce as much income for you as a big cow will. So Jed just talked about calving in sync with nature. That's the same for us too. Dad started that back in 96 or 97. I've never really known any different, to be honest with you, in my adult life, except for calving in May and June. Me and my little brother took on a group of cows here, I don't know, it was 5-6 years ago, Shane. They started calving February 20th, and I think the first thing Dad said is, I will not have anything to do with it, you guys go ahead. After that spring, I'm fairly certain that me and Shane will never start calving in February. It was long and horrendous, and we lost calves, and it was cold, and it's a lot of work. We had to put feed in front of them, the best hay we had, and all because we were looking for some more pasture and we got a few more cows out of the deal. There's a reason that Dad started calving back then. He moved everything back then just because it makes life easier. Jed had pictures of him fishing. Well, yeah, you can do so many other things when you're not having to be up every hour or 2 hours to go check calves because it's 30 below. So I would suggest you go back to May and June. If you want a better explanation, you better talk to Jed. That was his deal today. Okay, I'm gonna use up too much of my time bullshit here. Oh, so I talked about this a little bit earlier. So common for us up there is 6 to 14 acres for a cow, and it depends on the ground. It's really 7 to 10, somewhere in there is what it takes for a guy to run a cow. Average rental price in our area is about 20 bucks an acre. So I like to use the high end on both things. So 20 bucks an acre on 10 acres is 200 bucks to run that cow for, give or take 5 or 6 months. A lot of guys up there, it's 5 months. This year, 3 months. And they still had to pay that for that pasture. Whereas when we're cell grazing, like I told you, we're under 4 acres. Well, so I got 80 bucks into it, that other guy's got 200 bucks into it. Well, I just made $120 compared to him, and I didn't do anything but put up a couple cross fences and move my cows once a week. Being more efficient. It's a funny thing, and I put that on the bottom there. We live in the middle of farmers. We get to basically ranch along the river valleys and the low areas and the sloughy areas, and crap they don't want is what it amounts to. That's where we get to ranch. These farmers will manage their cropland down to a nickel on farmland. Their inputs as far as chemical and seed and everything, they have it down to maybe not a nickel, but it's within 25 to 50 cents per acre. They know what's going into that field. And you start talking to them about moving cows once a week, managing that ground to have a little better idea what you're getting out of it. Well, I don't have time for that. That's too much work. It's just being more efficient with what you got. And that's what they're doing with their farming, or so they think they are. You know, it's what it comes down to, is just being more efficient and getting the most out of what we have. So that's a big part of the financial end of what we're doing. So like I told you earlier, we're in a drought. This has been by far the driest 2 years in Benson County since 88, 89 is what we've been told. This is what we're growing. You know, so going back to some drought tolerance here. Granted, my father started this, like I said, in the 90s, so I've got 20 years of carbon sequestration and soil rebuilding and all that going for me. But at the same time, this is what we're growing. We're dry. You know, we didn't even have any snow last year, hardly. And I think we're looking at somewhere between 7 and 10 inches of rain, which is a lot more than I get that other people have gotten, but that's a lot less than what we're used to. So we actually qualified last year for Drought Zone 2, and we qualified earlier this year for Drought Zone 2. No, a little bit later. We missed out on some stuff. So for young guys that are ranching, it's tough for us, but this is what I get to run out into anyway through the summer. I'll show you some more pictures as I go. This is my oldest son, Logan, my middle son, Graydon. Graydon likes going out to see the cows. My baby boy, Clayton, he might be the rancher out of the group, though. He'll get in the Ranger before we even get anywhere. He's hollering at things. It's pretty funny. So that's one of the greatest parts of me getting to come back and be a rancher. I worked for public health for 7, 8 years, and I worked for the state animal health department for another 5 years. And when this is my 5th or 6th year ranch, and Dad said, I think maybe you should come home. It didn't take too much convincing for me to say, yep, I think I need to come home. And I'm really glad that I get that opportunity to live where I live and raise my children with me and actually get to be a part of their lives. So I got some more slides of grass here. This is what we started out with in June this year. I actually started there the end of April. This is what it looked like the first part of June. So we had some stockpiled grass, stuff that had grown up a little bit last year. So when I put my plans together, I go out and I inventory what the grass is showing me, and I try to start on the paddocks that I feel can handle it early on. And they'll eat that dead stuff off. Usually by the middle of May, stuff is starting to work. We're starting to get some green, but this is the stuff we're looking forward to, is that early June grass. That's when them cows really start to flush, and life is happy for them too. So here's some rotation. Again, I'm just going to show you some pictures. Here's mid-July now. You can see where I'm coming off that paddock onto the new one. That's probably a little more hammered than most people will take down. But again, I get over a year's rest on a lot of these pastures. This was my favorite one I'd showed. This is the one on the left. That was the first paddock I grazed. And we didn't get any rain until the middle of June. So this is the regrowth we had. And that's just, that's moisture in the soil, in the down where the grass can get a hold of it. That's pulling the moisture up from there, because we really didn't get a lot of rain. That stuff towards the end of June probably greened that up and helped it quite a bit. But that's quite a bit of regrowth for me, for our area. And I actually graze it again. I lie to you and I contradict myself saying I leave it for a year, but if there's an opportunity to regraze something, we will. You got to be flexible in your plan also. So some other things that I've been doing. I do raise some cover crops actually at the the grazing system I showed you, that's our early one. I got another where we go later in the year is about 15 miles south of there. So this, at that site, I have 150 acres of CRP that we took out, and I've been planting cover crops there. And this is obviously not this year. This was actually a couple of years ago where we had some massive growth and things looked really well there. So one of the ways that I'm able to survive and do what we're doing there too is we come off grass. And I've been a little nervous this year because the farmers are behind, but I got a guy that's right in our area who raises massive amounts of corn. So I get to graze corn stalks. So I don't know if you can see on the bottom left here. That's what I kick my cows out into. My cows' planar nutrition actually probably goes up compared to, you know, late October, that grass is pretty stale. There ain't a whole lot left. They're going up and stuff like that. And it baffles me how much corn this guy leaves behind every year. It's got to be 50, 60 bushels of corn that he leaves behind. And it's just, he says there's no way to get it back. You know, it's wind. It's this year, he says it's going to be dry rot. There's just things there's going to be cobs on the ground. So you may as well utilize it with cattle. So I get by pretty cheap. It's $0.25 per head per day is all I'm paying him. And last year I was able to run all the way up to Valentine's Day before I had to actually even contemplate feeding my cows. Probably didn't even need to then. But I'm still kind of head shy about things. I text Deanna and Cody, and they just tell me to relax. But it's hard when you've been taught all your life that you're supposed to start feeding cows at least January 1st. So we made it to the middle of February. Maybe I'll make it to March this year. So this is some of the stuff we've done in the past, and we still do quite a bit of this. Bale grazing, like I said, a lot of the land we have is reclaimed. It's tame pasture. This stuff is just a mile north of my dad's. He runs grass cattle there in the summertime. It was farmed to no end. It was just depleted. There wasn't anything hardly could grow there at all. There's a mat out there of hay and whatever you can think of. Just, it's a massive amount of carbon out there now, and that pasture is very good. It grows a lot of grass every year. Shane's yearlings are actually still out there. So the things that we're doing to improve what we're doing, bale grazing, obviously, I just showed you that. We do that in the winter. So just for instance, this past year I was able to get to Valentine's Day on corn stalks. So we went from there to, it was April 25th, and we moved the cows to the grazing system that I showed you there. So what did March, April? I fed cows for about 70 days. If I can do that every year, I think I can make money doing this. Some other things that we've been trying to get some of these tame pastures going. We're trying to interseed some legumes and grasses, get things to come. Like I told you with that retired CRP that I took out, we're planting cover crops, trying to get that soil coming along again. So, yearlings, let's see. See, and I've talked a lot about this stuff already. So we rough them calves through the winter. How much time do I got left?
Just a couple minutes.
Okay. One of the things I found this year, I was able to market my calves through Superior Livestock, and I don't know if that's an option for a lot of you. You want to put pot loads of calves together, but one of the things that I was suggested to put on there was a grass-fed, hormone-free, and natural. Well, I was kind of hesitant about it because I had to actually have an auditor come out and go through my books and paperwork and look at things and go through all the pain in the butt of this audit. But on the day that they sold, I gained 10 to 15 cents over what everybody else was selling those same exact type of cattle for. So I was just going to put that in there because I didn't know about all these programs. I had no idea. GAP, I don't know if you've ever heard of Global Animal Partnerships. Look for those programs. If this is something you're pursuing and something you're pushing forward in, look for those programs, because there's people want that. So they're willing to pay a premium for that stuff already. I can't imagine. I think this is just going to become more and more and more and build towards this more of a healthy livestock thing all the time. So, see, I'm all over the place. I'm kind of with my slides today. This is actually the yearling grazing system. This is where my calves run during the summertime. Dad breaks them down a little bit with polywires and different things there too. most of you guys in here know about how all this works, and I just wanted to, this was the last part that I have on here, some of this finances. So this for me sells me on the whole holistic thing and managing your grass and managing your cattle. So it's really fairly simple math, and I'll show it to you guys here. So 325 head of yearlings, and there's right around 500 acres there. We were there for 135 days. So simple math, it took me about 1.5 acres per head this year for me to have them yearlings there. We pay about 20 bucks an acre on rent for a grand total of $30 to run that yearling for the summer. So if my math is off, please tell me. Right around $6.66 per month, or 22 cents per day. It sounds like a hell of a deal to me. So unlike Daryl earlier, we actually weigh our calves when we kick them out. We average right around 495 pounds this year. When we shipped them, we averaged right around 7 numbers on the steers, but the heifers weren't too far behind, so 755. So we gained anywhere from around 240 to 260 pounds over those 135 days, which puts us where Daryl was talking about, right at about 1.9 pounds per day. Well, I mean, you guys can look at the math. I averaged actually a little better than $1.60 on my calves for that day. So they were making me at 1.9 pounds per day, they were making me a little over $3 a day. So minus the rent, so $2.86 a day on 325 head is 930 bucks a day, and 135 days is 125 grand. And that's what they made. That, you know, that was from the time they got there to the time they left. They were worth something before then too, but that's for 325 calves, that's what they made. So if you put that back against just that time, against that 500 acres, that was 250 bucks an acre. You show me a farmer who's making 250 bucks an acre. I guarantee you're not finding very many of them right now. So that's what I mean. My brother has been trying to convince me the last couple of years, turn that farm ground into something and run yearlings on it. And after this year, I think I'm gonna probably have to try that. So again, all this now, I've told my story, it all comes back to drought tolerance. I mean, just having healthy soil, healthy animals, you're gonna have some drought tolerance. There's no protection against drought. If we're droughted out another year or two, I'm probably no better off than a lot of guys around me. But I promise you right now, after this is our second year of drought, that I'm better off than the guys who are running it the way they've been running it. I've got one of my best friends in the world, lives just down the road from me. He kicked his cows out June 14th this year. He started feeding his cows September 22nd. Had to start feeding again. Had to start feeding the silage again. So we got 3 months. If I have to feed my cows 9 months out of the year, I don't know many guys that can, what do they say, I want $1 million for a ranch for a couple of years and I'm waiting to win my next $1 million. Well, that's the mentality there, how those guys are moving forward with their, I don't understand how they think that they can continue to do that. And he'll question me about how I'm managing things and making things work. So, but again, with the drought tolerance, it's your land's ability to withstand some being dry for a little while. One of the things though we were talking about a little bit earlier, I was talking to Josh about, I got to learn when to destock. I probably should have sold some cows this year. If we don't get much snow, I guarantee we'll be having to cut back on our cow herd just so that I make sure that I'm not going to hurt our grass, because if I hurt that grass, it doesn't just hurt me for this year, it hurts me for next year and the year after that and the year after that. So that's when they talk about destocking, that's one of the things that you need to make sure that you're aware of when you're looking at things. Yeah, future plans, things that we're trying to do. We've been putting in water lines and cross fences and making things better to improve the land for quite a while, and we continue to do that thing. I need to find cattle that better fit. Like I said, I got to start buying yearlings from some of these guys that are running their cows with their calves, honestly, until, you know, March, April, like Jed, and I don't know if that's what you're doing too. You still got your calves on? No, you're selling bulls. You can't do that kind of stuff. So, you know, there's quite a few guys though, like Dones, and they leave their calves on. And I wish I could do that. I wish I could convince the banker that I'm going to weed out the mamas that shouldn't be here. But I imagine he'll let me do that once I have them paid for.
Do it this year and that's your destocking.
Yeah, that's about right too. So for why we do a lot of these things for the land, for the money, but at the end of the day, for me, it's for my family. I get to be a dad. I got to take off here after a little bit because I get to go to a volleyball game. There's not a lot of people that work 8 to 5 that get to go to a lot of their kids' stuff. I'm very blessed in the fact that I get to do that. So if there's any questions for me, just let me know. So, thank you guys.